I paid for first class. Why should I move for a child? Those were the first words the passengers of Flight 885 heard when the real story began. The voice came from seat 2A, deep, assertive, and laced with irritation. Carter Langford did not even glance up from his newspaper as he spoke. His wide frame settled firmly into the plush leather of first class. A slight flush bloomed across his cheeks, perhaps from the heat, perhaps from indignation. Either way, it was clear. This man did not intend to move. At the other end of the aisle stood a small girl. Barely 11, with neatly braided hair tucked behind her head, she held an iPad mini in one hand and a boarding pass in the other. Her dress, a soft blend of white and rose with light lace at the collar and sleeves, carried the quiet confidence of a child raised to believe in grace, even when facing disrespect. The girl blinked once, twice, her eyes bright with confusion. She glanced toward the flight attendant for support. "Miss," the attendant said, adjusting her name badge that read Olivia Ward. "I understand there's a mix-up, but perhaps you could take another seat until we sort this out?" "But this is my assigned seat," the girl replied, her voice calm but firm. "2A." Olivia hesitated. Behind her professional smile, uncertainty flickered. She looked down at her manifest again, pretending to check. She already knew the name on the list. She had seen it. But the man in 2A was a regular, a frequent flyer, the kind of passenger who expected the world to shape itself around him. Carter let out a sigh and finally turned. His eyes swept over the girl with a subtle expression of disbelief, then dismissal. "They're letting kids book first class now?" he said to no one in particular. A ripple moved through the cabin. A few chuckled quietly. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others, silent but watching. Seat 2B remained empty. At the far end of the aisle, a tall black man in a charcoal sport coat and jeans watched with clenched hands. He was seated back in economy, his laptop still open on his tray. That was Gideon Sterling, father to the girl in the rose dress. He had boarded earlier, letting his daughter take her seat first, her moment, her dignity. Now he stood, not fully, not yet, just enough to see. Back in first class, the girl held her ground. "My name is Nova Palmer," she said quietly, "and this is my seat." Olivia shifted again. "We're still sorting the manifest. Please be patient, miss." "I am being patient," Nova replied. "I am simply stating a fact." Carter scoffed. "You're stating entitlement, sweetheart." "Sir," Nova responded without raising her voice, "I have a confirmed boarding pass for 2A. You are in my seat." That sentence landed heavier than expected. Not because it was loud, but because it was precise. And because no one, especially not a child, had spoken to Carter Langford like that in a long time. Olivia inhaled slowly. She turned to Carter. "Mr. Langford, may I ask if you would be willing to—" Carter cut her off. "I already told you. I paid for this seat. If there's an error, take it up with the airline." Nova stood still, not shaking, not stepping back. Just waiting, and the cabin watched. Before we go any further with this story, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or your state in the comments below. Because what happens next, you may not believe it, but it happened, and it changed more than just a flight. Nova had always known that her life looked different from the other kids at her school. While most of them spent their mornings rushing through breakfast or checking on homework they forgot to finish, Nova started her day in silence, in strategy, in quiet purpose. That morning, the morning of Flight 885, Nova woke up at 4:45 in the morning without an alarm. The sky was still dark outside the window of her small bedroom in North Dallas, but inside the room glowed softly. Fairy lights looped around the bookshelf, a soft white desk lamp blinking over a set of 3 devices still charging. Her bed was covered in a pastel quilt her grandmother made, but the desk beside it had tools more common in a Silicon Valley lab than in a child's room. Nova swung her legs over the edge of her bed and reached for her notebook. Not a diary, not a sketch pad, but a leather-bound journal labeled Launch Prep LA Meeting. She clicked her pen twice, underlined a line from the night before. "Speak clearly. Do not shrink. Remember, they will not expect it. That is your advantage." Then she checked the time zones across 3 cities. Dallas, Los Angeles, and Nairobi, where her platform was being piloted that week. She tapped into the back end of Brightmind's EDU, scanned the server logs, and noted one error to flag to the CTO. This was her normal, and she did not mind it. Not really. What she minded was the silence people gave her, not because she was rude, but because she was small, because she was young, because she was black. And to them that meant invisible until proven otherwise. Just 1 week ago, Nova had been invited, and then uninvited, from speaking at the Global EdTech Future Forum in Paris. At first she thought it was a scheduling glitch, but then her father showed her the reply email. We regret to inform you that our platform does not accommodate underage representatives as keynote speakers, regardless of company title. Not entrepreneurs, not leaders, just underage. They had assumed she was a mascot, a PR stunt. They did not know Bright Minds had been coded by Nova herself during the lockdowns, or that it had reached over 3 million student users globally by the age of 10. That morning she dressed slowly, choosing the white and rose dress with the delicate lace she had picked out weeks ago. Her fingers adjusted the soft pink bow at the waist as if preparing for battle. The dress was not what made her brave, but it reminded her she could be both a girl and a force. Outside in the kitchen, the lights were already on. Gideon Sterling stood at the stove in a white undershirt and gray sweatpants, pouring hot water into a tall ceramic mug. He turned as Nova walked in, offered a warm smile, and held up her favorite oatmeal bowl. Berries, almond milk, extra cinnamon? Nova nodded. Thank you, Dad. He watched her for a beat longer than usual. Then gently, you did not sleep much. I will rest after the pitch, she replied, then paused. Maybe. Gideon chuckled, but his eyes did not fully relax. You know, he said, sitting down across from her, the older I get, the more I realize you do not need to act older than you are to be heard. You just need people to stop using your age as an excuse not to listen. Nova looked up. But they will always do that. That is the problem. He nodded. That is true, but that is their problem, not yours. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been growing in her for weeks. Dad, do you think they will ever see me as equal, or do I have to become them first? That hurt, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. Gideon leaned forward, his voice lowered. Baby girl, you do not need to become them. You do not need to dress like them, sound like them, or mirror their world. You are building something they cannot even imagine. That is why they are afraid. But, she started. He stopped her, not harshly, just firmly. You do not need to become more adult to earn respect. You just need to be seen as human. Nova looked at her hands, small, brown, steady. Then she reached for her iPad, tucked it into her slim crossbody bag, and stood up. As they left the apartment, Gideon locked the door behind them, then looked up at the sunrise breaking through the city's skyline. Today, he said almost to himself, they will see her. They did not know it yet, but so would the world. The terminal at Dallas-Fort Worth International was already buzzing by the time Nova and her father arrived. They moved through the airport in quiet coordination, not as tourists or first-timers, but as two people who had traveled this road together many times before, one always watching, one always protecting. Nova walked slightly ahead, her crossbody bag slung neatly across her torso, the pale pink bow of her dress gently swaying as she moved. Her iPad was tucked securely inside, though she touched the top zipper now and then, more out of habit than worry. Gideon followed a few steps behind, wheeling a small gray suitcase with one hand and checking his phone with the other. He had just received a reminder about the investor briefing scheduled for the next morning in Los Angeles. Bright Minds was set to meet with a major education venture fund, and Nova would be presenting to their full board. He glanced up. Nova was scanning the departure board, her eyes quick and certain. Gate C31, she called back. On time. Gideon nodded. We have 45 minutes. Let's get through security. As they approached the TSA line, a uniformed officer gestured them forward. Nova stepped up first, handing over her passport and boarding pass. The agent barely glanced at the document before shifting his attention toward Gideon. She's traveling alone? Gideon raised an eyebrow. No, I'm her father. The agent squinted. Different last names. She kept her mother's name. Gideon replied calmly. Is that a problem? The agent hesitated, then begrudgingly waved them through. Nova did not say a word, but Gideon saw the way her fingers curled slightly as she passed through the metal detector. It was not the first time. Probably would not be the last. They collected their things in silence and made their way toward gate C31. As they walked, Gideon's phone buzzed again. Unknown number, no caller ID. He frowned and tapped it open. A single message appeared. Seat 2A, won't stay quiet. Be ready. That was all. No sender, no context. He stopped walking. Nova turned around. Everything okay? Gideon forced a neutral smile. Just investor spam. Keep going. We're almost there. He did not tell her what the message said. He did not want to startle her. Not before the meeting. Not again. At the gate, boarding was just beginning. First-class passengers were called. Nova stood poised, scanning the group ahead of her, noting the names and faces. Olivia Ward, the lead flight attendant, was checking boarding passes. Her smile was tight, her posture polished. Her eyes flicked briefly over Nova before snapping back to the manifest. Hi, Nova said, handing her boarding pass. Olivia hesitated. You're traveling alone? Nova replied, I'm in first class. My father is in economy. We do this often. Olivia scanned the ticket again, then nodded slowly. All right, go ahead. Nova walked down the jet bridge, her shoes making soft, careful steps against the rubber floor. Inside the aircraft, a flight attendant smiled and gestured to the left, toward the first-class cabin. It was quiet, dimly lit. A soft jazz melody played overhead. She found row 2 easily. Seat 2A by the window, but someone was already sitting there. A man, heavy-set, white, mid-50s, sat sprawled comfortably across the seat and armrest. A folded blazer draped over the seat back, his phone open on one knee, thumb scrolling casually. His shirt was stretched slightly across his belly, and his tie hung half-loosened at his collar. He did not look up. Nova blinked, then double-checked her boarding pass. 2A. No mistake. She cleared her throat. Excuse me, sir. The man looked up slowly, barely interested. Yes? I believe this is my seat, she said, extending the boarding pass gently. He squinted, looked at the ticket, then looked at her, then laughed. You're in first class? He asked with a tone halfway between amusement and disbelief. That's adorable. Nova blinked again. This is my assigned seat, she repeated. He leaned back, one arm still draped over the seat beside him. Well, it's taken. Before Nova could say anything else, Olivia entered the cabin behind her. Oh, she said quickly. There's been a seating issue? Nova turned toward her. I'm assigned to 2A. He's in my seat. Olivia looked at the man, then back at Nova, then at her manifest. And just like that, she hesitated. Nova saw it. That pause, that tiny flicker. Not of confusion, but of choice. I see, Olivia said. Let me double-check with the system. Nova nodded silently and stepped aside. But deep inside, she already knew. This was not a mistake. For a few long seconds, no one said anything. Nova stood beside seat 2A, her boarding pass still in hand. Olivia Ward stood between her and Carter Langford, trying, and failing, to remain neutral. And Carter, settled deep into the leather seat, refused to move even an inch. The silence in first class was not empty. It was loaded. Loaded with glances, with whispers, with assumptions. Some passengers looked toward Nova with quiet discomfort, not because they believed she was wrong, but because her presence had interrupted the expected order of things. A girl, a black girl, alone, in first class. Even with a ticket in her hand, it was enough to raise eyebrows. Nova stayed still. Her eyes locked not on Carter, not on Olivia, but on the small screen above her seat number. 2A glowed clearly in green. I think there's been some confusion, Olivia tried again, her voice quieter now. Mr. Langford is a longtime priority passenger. There may have been a system update. Nova turned to her. May I ask a question? Olivia blinked. Of course. If there was a system update, Nova asked calmly, why did it only affect my seat and not his? That question landed like a pin dropped in a silent church. Olivia opened her mouth, then closed it. Carter let out an audible sigh. "Here we go." Nova said nothing. Just then, from several rows back, beyond the curtain separating first class from economy, came a young voice. A girl's voice. Clear. Bright. "That's her! That's the girl from the app!" Heads turned. A moment later, a young Asian American girl, maybe 9 or 10, leaned forward from her window seat in economy row 6. She tugged at her father's arm and pointed excitedly toward the front. "Dad, that's Nova Palmer! She teaches coding! I watch her videos after school!" Her voice was loud enough to carry through the cabin, loud enough that Olivia froze, loud enough that Carter looked confused. Nova turned slowly. The girl in row 6 waved. Nova offered a small smile, but her cheeks flushed slightly, not from shame, but from the suddenness of it all. Another voice chimed in, an older woman from row 3. "I knew she looked familiar," the woman murmured. "Isn't she the kid that started that education platform?" And then another. "Wait, is that Bright Minds?" The ripple spread like ink in water. Passengers who had looked away before were now leaning in. Olivia's posture stiffened. Carter shifted in his seat. Nova remained quiet, her hands still steady at her sides. She was not smiling. She was not grandstanding. She was just standing, exactly where she was meant to be. "I am sorry," she said softly, this time to Olivia, "but I still have not been shown where the confusion is." Olivia looked down at her manifest again, but the paper in her hand was no longer her shield. It was starting to feel like a trap. Because the name on that manifest, Nova Palmer, was printed clearly next to seat 2A. The truth was right there, but the weight of years of expectation, of unspoken biases, was heavier than a passenger list. Carter, finally starting to feel the shift in the cabin, leaned forward. "Look, I do not know who she is, but I paid for this seat. I fly this route every week. I do not have time for whatever this is." "Whatever this is," someone repeated behind him. It was a woman's voice, calm, older, from the back of first class. Her name would not be known until later, but her voice landed like a gavel. "This," she said, "is a young woman claiming the seat she paid for. You are the one refusing to move." Carter turned around, annoyed. "And who are you?" The woman met his gaze. Someone watching. Nova did not move. Her gaze now fell on Olivia again. "I do not want to escalate anything," she said, "but I am asking one last time for my seat." Silence again. Then the sound of tapping. Someone in row 1 typing on their phone. A flash. A camera click. The moment had entered the digital world. Nova remained still, but inside she felt it. The tide was turning. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 885 had shifted. What began as a quiet moment of resistance had turned into a rising wave of awareness. One child's voice from economy had cracked the shell. A few murmurs had turned into recognition, and recognition had turned into scrutiny. Now a battle was unfolding in silence. The kind of silence that weighs heavier than words. The kind of silence that dares someone to break it with truth. Nova stood, her shoulders square, her posture composed. She was not pushing. She was not pleading. She was simply waiting, her presence demanding attention, not by volume, but by clarity. Olivia Ward glanced between the names on the manifest and the faces before her. Her hands clutched the papers slightly tighter than before, as if hoping it would make the truth disappear. Carter Langford shifted again in Seat 2A, clearly aware that the situation was no longer in his favor, but still unwilling to back down. His pride, like his blazer now wrinkled against the armrest, was crumpling slowly, but refusing to fold. Nova's voice had been the center until now, but the next voice came from the left aisle. Calm, steady, a different kind of authority. "If no one else will do what is right," the voice said, "then I will." Heads turned. From seat 4C, a woman slowly rose. She was older, likely in her late 60s. Her silver hair was pinned into a low chignon, and she wore a soft blue suit with pearl earrings. Her movements were slow, but not frail, deliberate. "Excuse me," she said gently as she stepped past a stunned seatmate. "Miss Palmer, is that correct?" Nova nodded, her voice catching slightly. Yes, ma'am. My name is Esther Linwood, the woman said, offering a brief smile, and I believe you are sitting in the correct seat. She turned to Carter without blinking. And you, sir, are sitting in the wrong one. Carter scoffed, letting out a low chuckle. I've flown this route for 13 years. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Esther replied, because I've watched this happen before. I've lived it. Olivia opened her mouth to intervene, but Esther held up a finger, not to silence but to pause. I am not here to embarrass anyone, Esther said, but what is happening here is not just a seat dispute. It is a mirror, a reflection of who we believe belongs and who we question. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I have sat in rooms where my voice was dismissed, Esther continued. I have watched young people, especially young women of color, be underestimated, relocated, erased, quietly, politely, but not today. She turned to Olivia. You know what the manifest says. You know who that seat belongs to. Olivia swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am, I do. Then do not let hesitation become complicity. Rum. With that, Esther turned to Nova and extended her hand. I would be honored, she said, to switch seats with you, Miss Palmer. Nova stared for a moment, unsure how to respond. The woman before her did not speak with pity, but with respect, with choice, with intention. Slowly, Nova nodded and reached out, placing her hand in Esther's. Carter leaned back, annoyed but quiet now. As Esther moved toward row 6 to take a new seat in Economy Plus, a murmur rippled through the cabin. It was not just about a seat anymore. It was about who had chosen to act and who had chosen to stay still. Nova sat down in Seat 2A, her dress settled neatly beneath her, the soft pink fabric folding gently across her knees. She placed her iPad on the tray in front of her, then looked straight ahead. Olivia adjusted her scarf nervously and turned toward the front galley. Someone in row 1 whispered, She handled that better than most adults I know. Someone else replied, She shouldn't have had to. In the back of the plane, Gideon Sterling watched everything unfold with a clenched jaw and a quiet pride. He did not step in, not because he did not want to, but because he wanted the world to see what it looked like when a girl stood on her own and earned it all the same. Esther Linwood did not ask for applause. As she sat down beside a confused passenger in row 6, she simply nodded toward the front. A line had been crossed, not by force, not by outrage, but by a choice to stand. For the first time since boarding Flight 885, Nova Palmer was seated exactly where she was supposed to be, Seat 2A. The tension had not fully left the cabin, but it had shifted. Carter Langford sat quietly now, his lips pressed into a thin, irritated line, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Olivia Ward retreated to the front galley, adjusting her scarf repeatedly, as if trying to untangle something more than fabric. Esther Linwood had settled into a new seat in Economy Plus, where she calmly opened a paperback novel and began to read as if nothing had happened. And Nova. Nova sat tall, hands folded over her iPad, eyes steady. She had said little, but her presence had spoken volumes. The flight attendants resumed final preparations. The doors were closed. Safety instructions began playing over the speakers. Outside the aircraft, the Texas sun stretched across the tarmac as Flight 885 pulled away from the gate and began taxiing toward the runway. Inside, the cabin dimmed slightly, and a soft, instrumental version of Claire de Lune drifted through the speakers. As the plane lifted off, Nova closed her eyes briefly and exhaled. The worst, she thought, might be behind her. Not everyone had understood, but some had. That was enough for now. 15 minutes into the flight, turbulence began to stir. Not severe, just enough to rattle cups and draw a few quick gasps. Olivia came through the aisle, checking belts and murmuring reassurances. Carter shifted in his seat and adjusted the tray table. Nova steadied herself with one hand on the armrest. Then a sudden jolt. Nothing dangerous, but for Nova, it triggered something. Her breathing quickened. She closed her eyes, gripped her seat tighter. The pressurized air felt thinner somehow. Her fingers trembled. From the back of the plane, someone stood up. It was not a flight attendant. A woman from row 17, African-American, early 30s, dressed in a navy blazer and slacks, moved swiftly and with purpose. She made her way toward the first-class cabin, passing stunned passengers who turned to watch. "Excuse me," she said to Olivia as she passed. "I need to check on her." Olivia blinked. "I'm sorry, but first class is restricted." The woman held up a slim black badge. "I am her chief of staff." By the time Olivia could respond, the woman had already reached Nova's side. "Nova," she said gently, kneeling beside her. "Breathe in. 4 seconds. Out. 4 seconds. Just like we practiced." Nova's eyes opened. She nodded slowly. "In. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her breathing began to steady. Carter stared, bewildered. "Wait, she has a staff." The woman ignored him. "I brought ginger chews," she said softly, pulling a small tin from her pocket. "Take one. You will feel better in 5 minutes." Nova accepted it without a word. Her hands were still shaking slightly, but her face had calmed. Olivia approached hesitantly. "I apologize, but I do need to confirm." "She is not just a kid," the woman said, rising to her full height. Her voice was calm but firm. "She is Nova Palmer, founder and chief executive officer of Bright Minds Education Technologies." Dead silence. A few seats back, a businessman's tablet clattered softly as it slid off his knee. Someone whispered, "She's the CEO?" "Yes," the woman continued. "At 10 years old, she created a platform that now serves over 3 million students globally. She has spoken at international conferences, advised government panels, and written federal education policy drafts. She is not a child on a school trip. She is here on business. Her business." Carter's face had turned a mottled shade of red. I didn't know," he muttered. "You did not ask," Maya replied. Nova gave a small nod. Her name was Maya Dean. She was more than a staffer. She was Nova's shield, her right hand, her bridge to a world that still struggled to believe genius could come from a soft voice and a pink dress. Nova turned to her, whispering, "Thank you." Maya smiled. "Always." From behind them, someone began to clap. One clap, then two. Then others followed, soft, unsure, but growing. Nova did not stand. She did not wave. She simply looked out the window at the clouds passing below. Above the noise, above the judgment, exactly where she belonged. After Maya Dean returned to her seat in row 17, the cabin of Flight 885 grew quiet again. The turbulence had passed. Nova Palmer sat calmly in seat 2A, the tension in her shoulders slowly unwinding. Her breathing had steadied. Her hands were still, resting atop the closed iPad on her tray table. But something in the air still felt unsettled. Carter Langford, seated beside her in 2B, glanced over occasionally. He had not spoken since Maya revealed Nova's identity. His expression was unreadable. Not quite ashamed, not quite apologetic. Just calculating. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then Carter rose from his seat. He adjusted his wrinkled shirt, retrieved his folded blazer from the seat back, and made his way down the aisle. Olivia Ward watched him but said nothing. She assumed he was headed to the lavatory. He was not. Instead, Carter turned down a short service corridor that led toward the rear galley. From there, he slipped into a space near the emergency phone, a device intended for discreet communications during flight. He lifted the handset and dialed a sequence. Not a standard in-flight request, not customer service. A few rings, then a connection. Axon Edge Internal Operations, identify. Carter lowered his voice. Langford, Carter, clearance Alpha 9, flag target. There was a pause. Then, target code. Passenger 2A, Nova Palmer. Another pause. Under what grounds? Suspicion of forged identity credentials, possibly traveling under false pretense. Recommend soft diversion. The voice on the other end said nothing at first. Then, understood. Proceeding with silent notification protocol. The line went dead. Carter hung up, returned the handset to its mount, and exhaled slowly. He straightened his tie, smoothed back his silver hair, and made his way back to his seat like nothing had happened. To anyone watching, it looked like a routine bathroom break. But above them in the cockpit, a red indicator light began to blink. Captain Weller, a man in his early 60s with salt and pepper hair and steady hands, looked over from his instrument panel. His co-pilot raised an eyebrow. Security ping. Weller nodded. Passenger 2A. Flagged by internal systems. Secondary verification requested. Nova Palmer, the co-pilot asked, checking the manifest. Weller did not answer immediately. He read through the alert. Vague language, non-specific concern. Do we know who issued the flag? Source, external operations partner. Confidential tag. The co-pilot exhaled. Could be nothing. Or it could be everything, Weller replied. Back in economy, Gideon Sterling looked at his phone again. Another message had appeared. Same number as before. They're moving. Expect deflection protocol. Stay alert. Gideon stared at the screen, then at his daughter seated far ahead. He did not know who had sent the message. He only knew they were right. This was not over. In seat 2A, Nova glanced out the window at the endless sky. She had not noticed Carter's absence, but she felt the difference when he returned. The air seemed heavier. The back of her neck tingled. Something was wrong. She could not explain it, but she had learned to trust her instincts. The way they fluttered just before a bad line of code crashed a system. She turned to Olivia as she passed with a tray of waters. Excuse me, Nova asked softly. Has the captain made any announcements? Not yet, Olivia replied, forcing a smile. Everything is fine. Nova nodded, but her eyes narrowed. Back in Seat 17, Maya received a ping on her phone, a silent alert from the Bright Minds security suite. It was tied to flight data routing and behavioral monitoring, a protocol designed for executives traveling under public scrutiny. A new entry had appeared. Passenger flagged. Subject N. Palmer. Source, anonymous override. Maya's jaw clenched. She opened a secure chat and typed, they used an ops channel, not airline-initiated, external pressure. Seconds later, a reply came. Source triangulated, Axon Edge Capital. Internal call tag matches Langford. Maya leaned back, her fingers curling into fists. Of course it was Carter. It all made sense now. 3 months earlier, Bright Minds had offered equity participation to several institutional firms. Axon Edge had declined, with a note that read, we do not allocate to founder-led preteen ventures. Consider reapplying post-acquisition phase. Carter Langford had been one of their advisors. Now here he was, trying to erase what he once dismissed. Maya typed a final message. Understood. Preparing internal escalation. She looked up the aisle toward Nova. The girl was sitting quietly, but Maya knew that was about to change. Captain Weller's voice came over the speaker with the practiced calm of someone who had flown hundreds of flights and weathered hundreds of unexpected situations. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an operational notice received from ground control, we will be diverting briefly to Oakland International Airport for a precautionary passenger check. We apologize for the inconvenience and thank you for your cooperation. The announcement hung in the air like a dense fog. Passengers exchanged glances. Some frowned, others looked around uneasily. A few instinctively reached for their phones, only to remember airplane mode was still engaged. Nova Palmer's head turned slightly as the captain's words echoed in her mind. A precautionary passenger check. She had no doubt who that passenger was. Maya Dean sat upright in row 17, her jaw tightening. She reached into her travel bag and opened a secure channel on her device. With a few taps, she activated a Bright Minds protocol labeled Horizon Monitor, a silent, cloud-based incident recorder that logged interactions and system changes around flagged individuals during transit. She whispered under her breath, they're really doing this. 2 minutes later, the front galley curtain shifted. Olivia Ward emerged, walking with forced composure. She stopped at seat 2A and leaned in slightly. Miss Palmer, the captain would like a word with you. Would you mind coming to the front of the aircraft, please? Carter Langford, seated beside Nova, gave a quiet exhale that bordered on smug. Nova, however, did not flinch. She looked Olivia in the eye. Am I being detained? Olivia blinked, startled. No, of course not. This is just a procedural check. Then I'll go, Nova said, standing up slowly. But I will expect an explanation. Passengers in first class tracked her movement as she stepped into the aisle. Her soft pink dress barely swayed as she moved forward, head held high. As Nova passed the curtain into the flight deck vestibule, Olivia guided her into a small conference nook just outside the cockpit. Captain Weller stood waiting, his uniform neat, expression unreadable. "Miss Palmer," he began, "thank you for coming forward. We received a notice indicating an inconsistency with a passenger's manifest information. We are required to confirm your travel credentials." Nova folded her hands calmly in front of her. "You have my boarding pass. You have the flight manifest. My identification was cleared through TSA. What inconsistency are you referring to?" The captain hesitated. "There was a third-party notification. A security partner flagged your seat under the suspicion of identity mismatch. We are required to act on that data until disproven." Nova tilted her head slightly. "Was the flag issued by the airline?" "No," Weller admitted. "It was relayed through an external channel tied to ground coordination." "And was there a direct accusation, or just discomfort from someone on board?" The captain said nothing. His silence was answer enough. Nova reached into her travel pouch and calmly pulled out a compact folder. She placed it on the table. Inside were photocopies of her passport, her TSA pre-check certification, and a notarized letter confirming her executive status for Bright Minds Education Technologies. "Everything is in order," she said. "I'm here to present in Los Angeles to a board of education investors. This flight is my business travel." Captain Weller reviewed the documents slowly. His hands were steady. His voice, when it returned, was low. "It appears your credentials are valid," Nova nodded. "So may I ask why my identity is being questioned mid-flight?" Before he could answer, she added, "Or is this a situation where someone with more miles, more money, or more melanin deficiency decided that a young black girl in seat 2A made them uncomfortable?" Weller's lips pressed into a thin line. "We follow standard procedures." "Then perhaps it is time," Nova said evenly, "to review what those standards really protect, and who they always seem to target." A pause, a beat of silence. Then the captain stood straight and nodded once. "You may return to your seat. We will complete landing protocol at Oakland and clear this with the ground team. There will be no further interruption." Nova gave a polite nod. "Thank you, Captain." She turned, walked past Olivia, and re-entered the cabin. As she made her way back toward row 2, several passengers sat straighter. A few gave her subtle nods of encouragement. From row 6, the little girl who had first recognized her mouthed the word brave. Nova smiled faintly but kept walking. Maya was already typing rapidly in the background, escalating the incident to the Bright Minds legal and communications teams. She had known this might happen, but seeing it unfold in real time, with so many eyes pretending not to see, added a different kind of weight. Gideon Sterling sat frozen in economy, watching every move. He had always believed in teaching Nova how to stand up for herself, but nothing could prepare a parent for the moment their child had to stand alone, at 30,000 feet. As Flight 885 descended toward Oakland International Airport, the cabin was quiet but tense. The announcement had been made. A routine passenger check, they had said, a minor diversion, but every soul on board knew the truth hung heavier than the altitude drop. And most eyes were now turned toward the girl in seat 2A. Nova Palmer had returned to her seat with the quiet dignity of someone who had been down this road before. She said nothing. She adjusted her dress, folded her hands, and gazed out the window at the patchwork landscape drawing closer beneath them. In row 6, the little girl who had recognized her earlier clutched her tablet tightly, staring forward like she was watching history unfold. And in row 4C, Esther Linwood closed her paperback, set it on the tray table, and slowly rose to her feet. She did not ask permission. She did not wait for turbulence to settle. She walked straight up the aisle, her soft blue jacket fluttering slightly as she passed. She stopped beside seat 2B. Carter Langford looked up, surprised then annoyed. "Something you need?" he asked, his tone clipped. Esther did not flinch. She looked down at him like one might look at a cracked photograph, familiar but distorted by time and damage. "I remember your voice," she said calmly. Carter blinked. "Excuse me? You made the same call 20 years ago," Esther said. "Only that time, it was about my daughter." The words landed like thunder in a church. A ripple ran through the passengers closest to them. Carter's mouth opened, then closed. Esther continued, her voice low but unwavering. She was traveling alone for a college interview. Honor student, national merit finalist. And you called security because, in your words, she looked out of place in business class. Carter turned slightly in his seat, scanning for an exit to the conversation. You have the wrong person? No, Esther said, I do not. She leaned forward just enough that only a few could hear, but everyone could feel. She never flew again after that, Esther whispered. She went to college, graduated early, became a researcher. But she always asked why that moment had to happen, why she had to prove she belonged. You may not remember her name, but I remember yours. Carter shifted uncomfortably, face flushing. Nova remained silent, still staring out the window. Then slowly she spoke. Her voice was soft but crystal clear. This is not the first time someone like me has been flagged for simply being present. Esther turned toward her, gently placing a hand on the headrest in front of Nova. And it will not be the last, Esther said, unless people start remembering more than just their names. Olivia Ward approached, unsure whether to intervene. Miss Linwood, please return to your seat for landing. Esther turned, her eyes sharp but calm. I'll sit, she said, but I will not be quiet. Then she returned to row 4C and sat with the kind of grace that made even the overhead bin seem quieter. In the cockpit, Captain Weller received confirmation that the flight had clearance to land at Oakland. His co-pilot asked, You believe the kid now? Weller didn't answer immediately. He just muttered, I never disbelieved her, but I let the system speak first. Back in first class, Nova reached for her iPad, tapped it once, and typed a short note. Maya Dean, seated several rows behind, received the message instantly. We are not asking for justice anymore. We are recording everything. Maya nodded to herself. She opened a protected archive and began uploading all cabin footage, transcripts, and logs from Brightmind's embedded monitor protocol, discreetly installed as a beta program on selected flights for public accountability research. Olivia passed by once more, her eyes briefly meeting Nova's. Nova did not look away. Instead, she said, in a tone firm enough to pierce silence, but polite enough to remain undeniable. Fear made the call, Miss Ward, not facts. Olivia froze, then slowly looked down. The plane dipped slightly as landing gear engaged. And in that brief moment, between sky and earth, silence and truth, everyone on board understood one thing. Nova Palmer was not here to ask for space. She was here to take back what had always been hers. The wheels of Flight 885 touched down on the tarmac at Oakland International with a soft bounce and a drawn-out sigh from the cabin brakes. As the plane rolled to a quiet stop at a remote bay, no one applauded. No one clapped. They were waiting, watching, holding something in their breath that they could not quite name. The engines whirred low, the fastened seatbelt sign remained on, and the silence stretched. Captain Weller stepped out of the cockpit and walked slowly to the front of the first-class cabin. Olivia Ward stood nearby, unsure whether to retreat or assist. In seat 2A, Nova Palmer remained calm, her iPad now resting on her lap, screen glowing faintly. Maya Dean stood up from row 17 and walked forward with quiet authority. In her hand was a secure device, square, matte black, displaying a single blinking light. She handed it to the captain without ceremony. This is the full log from Brightmind's Protocol Horizon. It includes a time-stamped copy of the cabin audio, manifest data, and a flagged recording of a call made from the rear service phone at approximately 16 minutes after takeoff. Weller raised an eyebrow. That is outside passenger access. Maya nodded. Exactly. It also includes the voice match, Carter Langford, issuing a false flag on passenger 2A. Gasps rose softly in the surrounding seats. Carter, still seated, shifted but did not speak. Esther Linwood stood slowly from row 4 and joined the cluster. Her expression was composed, but her eyes were steel. We are also filing an emergency complaint, Maya added, to the Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration. We have video evidence, passenger testimony, and biometric ID validation on file. The captain looked between them. Are you asking us to remove him now? Nova spoke before Maya could. No, she said. We are not asking for removal. We are recording responses. Every system that acted on his false report. Every person who hesitated when the truth was already printed on a manifest. Every action taken under assumption and fear, it is all being archived. She turned toward Carter. We are not dragging you out. We are letting your silence walk you out. Carter's jaw clenched. You think you can destroy my career with a gadget and a speech? Maya answered. No, but your voice did the rest. Esther looked at him, then added with precision, and your pattern did the rest. This is not your first time, but it will be the last without consequences. Olivia took a quiet step backward. Nova turned to the other passengers. Bright Minds was founded to teach students how to think critically, ask questions, and challenge assumptions. What happened on this flight proves the lesson is needed more than ever, not just in classrooms, but in boardrooms, in cockpits, and in the quiet spaces between power and silence. At that moment, a message appeared on Maya's screen. Axon Edge Capital confirms. Langford suspended pending investigation. Public statement incoming. She turned the screen slightly toward Carter. You might want to check your inbox. He looked away. Captain Weller stepped back, shook Maya's hand and said, We will cooperate fully. This will not happen again. Maya nodded. It will, but next time people will know what it costs. Passengers began murmuring, not with fear, but with release, with clarity. The cabin door opened. A small group of airline ground staff stepped in, not to remove anyone, but to witness. They nodded respectfully to Nova, to Maya, to Esther, and then turned to Carter without a word. He stood, straightened his blazer, and walked down the aisle like a man leaving a courtroom where the verdict had already been delivered, by a 12-year-old girl with nothing but truth on her side. Nova remained seated until the others deplaned. When she finally stood, Maya offered her a small smile. Anything you want to say to the press outside? Nova thought for a moment, then nodded. As she stepped into the sunlight of the Oakland tarmac, she turned to the gathered crowd of cameras, microphones, and passengers who had waited. Her voice was calm. Her words were clear. I was not too young to fly first class. Some people were just too small to share it. Then she walked forward, and the world followed.